And I'm like, wait, I wasn't that bad. But it thinks yes. Okay, we're going to get started. I am really excited to teach this class because this is like one of my most favorite classes to teach. And it's such an important topic, so much. And it's all about navigating inspections. So, hi, Connor, good morning. We're going to let Autumn in. We'll
Hey, good morning,
get
Kristen.
everybody on board. And then we'll dive into the material. Remember, if you're watching online, I do not have, I don't have the QR code for class check-in on this one. I'll try to bring it up at the end off of one of the other classes, but if you can look for that bit.ly link or the QR code, and check in, that would be awesome. If you are watching a recording of this, I forgot to do that last night. I'm going to confess I went to a concert last night and to get home till late, and so this didn't happen. And yesterday was a busy day, so I apologize. I also apologize to David and to Leah. Yesterday they came early for tech, and it was because of my typo in my email. So I apologize for that you guys were here early. Yeah, sometimes my eyeballs don't see what I did wrong. So I apologize for that, guys. Let's get started. I've got Autumn on. Again, if you can come on camera, I want to see your face. I want to see your face. If you can't, I understand, but it is my preference. And don't hesitate to ask questions and what have you. I will tell you, if you want to ask a question, when I share screen, it's a little challenging for me to see the chat at the same time. So don't hesitate to unmute yourself and say, I got a question. Connor, you're good at that. I got a question. So I that does not bother me at all. I just want you to know it's just a little challenging to navigate the chat when I'm sharing screen, because then that takes up the whole screen. So I didn't want anybody to think that I was ignoring them when they when they're doing questions. So okay, well then let's just dive in, because I've got so much material for this class of navigating inspections. So let's just get to it, if you guys are ready. Connor, can you hear me okay? Is the volume all right?
Yeah, no, it sounds good.
Okay, I'm going to turn it up a little bit, because if you ask questions, I want to be able to hear you. Okay, let's go into the view and go to slideshow. Yeah. Oh, why is it not showing me? No, I want slideshow. Usually it shows me down here. Okay, let's go. Navigating inspections, the most difficult part of the transaction. We lose more deals during inspection period than any other time of the transaction. So this is a period and a point in the transaction. You got to know what you're doing. And there are some things that if you don't hit the timelines, something automatically happens and it's not good. And we're going to talk about that. So let's get into navigating inspections. Your role and the buyer's role as the agent. Please do not try to be the expert about the house and just please leave the expertise to the professional inspectors. If you, was it, oh, it was Tuesday when we had Matt Bailey from Win Home Inspections come talk to us at launch, when he was talking about, different things with inspections. And that's why I like to do the negotiating inspection class right after we have an inspector, is so that you kind of got an idea of what he does, how he does it, what are the issues he sees, all of that. And after you go on a lot of inspections as an agent, you are going to be able to spot some things that could be an issue. And that's fine. But don't start acting like you have the knowledge and expertise of an inspector just based on witnessing inspections. Does that make sense? Because I see it all the time. Oh, well, that's a problem. And the agent saying that. Instead, yes, you can say, that could be an issue. And that's why you're going to do inspections. We're going to have a professional look at these things and give you an expert opinion. Because while I've seen some of these things in houses before, I'm not the expert. Stay in your lane for the main reason, liability. You start acting like an expert and your client makes decisions based on your acting like an expert. And you may be wrong. You might say, oh, there's that cracks. That's fine. That's fine. No problem there. Okay. Don't. Yes, you're going to build knowledge. Yes. And that's awesome. But remember, stay in your lane. Do not let your buyers buy a house without doing inspections. Well, that's always been my mantra, but the market hasn't always supported that, especially right now. And we have never used the in its present condition addendum more than we do right now. We've never used it, and it wasn't even a thing or existed for many years. So the in its present condition addendum that many buyers are putting with their offer has 3 choices on it. And you've got to know these choices on this in its present condition addendum, because if you don't understand it and you advise your buyers incorrectly, that's a really bad thing. It can get you in trouble. It can put them in a horrible position. So choice number 1 is that the buy, and the reason you would use it in an offer is to make your offer more desirable than somebody else's offer. Because remember, when you're writing an offer, you're trying to craft an offer that'll make your buyer stand out. So if you had a buyer who maybe couldn't go way crazy over list price, but they can come and say, we're going to do little to no inspections or what have you, or we might do an appraisal waiver. You can put other terms in there that might make you look better than a high price offer that still has to, get through inspections, and they might want to negotiate on it. So the in its present condition, like I said, the first is the box number 1 is a buyer says, I'm going to do inspections. However, seller, I'm only going to either take the house as is or cancel the contract. I cannot ask for any repairs or renegotiate the terms of the contract based on the inspections, but it still gives the buyer the right to do inspections. Box number 2 is, as a buyer, I'm going to do inspections just for my knowledge, and I will take the house as is, period. I cannot cancel. Choice number 3. Choice number 3 is, as a buyer, I'm not going to do any inspections, none, zip, zero. Makes me tremble. And I will take the house is, and I am waiving any right to cancel. I can't change my mind. I'm not doing inspections, nothing. And we see that going on in this market. And as a former broker, I hate it with a passion, because I think it's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. Because if for any reason you think, a seller thinks, and you have to be careful, sellers will get excited. And I talked about this at the home selling seminar. Sellers will get excited that a buyer's not doing inspections. Hey, that's great, right? We got them. They're paying top dollar and no inspections. Yay, us. I think it should give you heartburn. Because I can't tell you how many times a buyer moves into a house, something starts happening, a leak. They pull drywall off and see a crack. Just different things can happen. Something stops working. And they'll go to the seller's disclosure and look at it. They'll go to their inspection report, but oh, wait, they didn't do one. So they're only going to rely on that seller's disclosure. If the seller didn't disclose everything they know, that's their legal duty. Actually, the seller's disclosure is based on consumer law. That is a consumer protection law. The consumers, a seller has to disclose what they know. The actual form is not legally required, just but we do in our board, in KCRER, in our organization, which is good because people forget what they did in a house, or especially if they've lived in it forever. You forget, well, when did we replace that water heater? Or you'll just totally forget some. If you live in there 20 years, you might forget some of the stuff you've done. So the seller's disclosure is a guide to help a seller try to remember everything they've done to that house. But here's what'll happen. Maybe they didn't know about what's just occurred to the buyer who just moved in. But guess what the buyer's going to think? Say that out loud.
Definitely.
Yeah, but the seller did know. 99% of the time when I would talk to angry buyers over this scenario, they'd say, the seller knew. They were convinced. So it is, and a lawsuit is a lot worse than negotiating inspection repairs. It's going to be a lot more expensive 9 times out of 10. Come on. So that's why you have to, that's why I hate buyers not doing inspections. I get reality, but you've got to make it very clear. That's why if I was a buyer's agent and I had a buyer not doing inspections, I would do everything in my power for them to get a home warranty. I would, because that could help from a lawsuit occurring. Now, home warranty doesn't cover everything, but it covers many things, and it covers major systems: electrical, heating, cooling, plumbing, and then some other things. But it covers the main systems, the infrastructure of the home. So if I had a buyer who to win the house waived inspections, I would do everything in my power to get them a home warranty. And matter of fact, I would have been talking about it in my buyer's consultation, that if we get to a point that to win a house, you consider waiving inspection, which, and I would always say, which as an agent, I do not recommend. However, we're going to look at what it takes to win a house. And then you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, will make that decision. But I want you to know that here's what I would do. The best protection we can do is get you a home warranty. Okay. Do not let your buyers rely on a previous inspection report. They cannot use the previous report as if it's theirs during an inspection period or a resolution. Now, if you were at the home selling seminar, you know that we talked about the value of getting a pre-listing inspection. And I do think it's very valuable, especially in this current market where buyers are giving up their right to do inspections, that they have at least something. It protects the seller and it protects the buyer, but they can't negotiate on it because that's somebody else's inspection report. And where this used to come into play is if a previous buyer had done an inspection and decided to cancel the contract, then the listing agent has to make those available. They cannot withhold that from a new buyer unless, and they are to update, or the seller is to update the seller's disclosure of the new findings. That doesn't get done very often. But at least if they have the seller's disclosure and the inspection, but they are to If you see a house that has gone under contract and then gone back on the market, 9 times out of 10, that's because of inspections. So always say, are there inspection reports? Because they are required to disclose those to you, previous ones. However, again, your buyer number 2, can't use those in that inspection period as their own, because they did not pay for it. It is not theirs, and they don't have legal recourse if, say, an inspector missed something on that previous report. And if you were at the home selling seminar, you heard Alex from Avid Inspection say, we're not licensed, and you can print a business card tomorrow and say, I'm a home inspector. That's not very reassuring. For a very brief window of time, Kansas did have a requirement for them to be licensed for like a 2-year period when I was a newer agent. And then I don't know who lobbied against it, some part of the industry. Oh, no, we don't need licenses. Oh, yeah. You're like, really? You don't need licenses? So, does that make sense that a buyer cannot use a previous inspection as their own, and they can't negotiate during the period? Now, they could take that that previous inspection report and ask for things in their offer. They just can't take that previous inspection report and take it to the inspection period as their negotiating tool. Make sense? Any questions online about that? Okay. Agents, make certain your buyer attends the inspection. If not, then schedule time for them to talk to the inspector to go over the report. You should not be interpreting the report to them. I see agents do it all the time. Oh yeah, I went over the report with my buyers. Well, yes, you're going to go over it with them to figure out if we're going to negotiate on anything. However, you should not be the one saying this was important, this was a priority, this isn't. If your buyers cannot be at the inspection, then they have to go over the report with the inspector. Again, that's a liability issue. Then you're pretending to be an inspector and take on that role when you do that. You should be there for the entire inspection. Here's what I do. Here's how I see being with my buyers at the inspection. It is the point in which your buyers will be in the house for their longest period of time before they own it. So I look at it this way. I think it's when they should bond and fall in love with the house more. They should be placing furniture in their mind where it's going to go. That's why I always make sure we have a measuring tape or a laser. I tell them, if you have any big appliances, like a big refrigerator or a big sofa, measure it, so that you can kind of play around and where you would want that. I want them taking video of every single room, because the listing pictures don't show all angles of a room, and you're going to forget how many windows in a room, and you might be wanting to get curtains or something. Measure the windows if you're going to get window treatment. Bring paint samples so you can kind of see what different colors of paint. I want them dreaming and scheming inside of that house, because we're going to be there a minimum of 2 hours. Minimum of 2 hours. So, and I also want them doing something. And you don't want, as Alex said on Tuesday, or I said, you do not want them following the inspector around. I let that happen once when I was new and green, and the inspection took twice as long. Oh, it was painful for me, and it was painful for the inspector. So I was like, oh, no. We let them go do their job. They need to concentrate. We can't afford for them to be interrupted, get off train of thought, and maybe miss something in their inspections. Because they're very methodical about what they check next. And if they're interrupted, they might miss something. Might get them off task. And that would not be a good thing. I actually bring food and drink for my buyers and the inspector. I've got beverages, I've got treats. If it's a morning inspection, I've got pastries or bagels. for me and them. It's not just for them. I get hungry too. So, and it's just a little extra something that I did. Actually, okay, this makes me sound so old, but I'll go there. I didn't have a cell phone that I could take video with. I had a cell phone, but when I was a brand new agent, I couldn't take video. So I would bring my little camcorder and I would videotape the whole house and give that tape to my client so they could go home and be able to watch it. And now they can take the video. Yeah, it makes me sound old. Yeah, David's over here grinning like, yeah, you're old. I was in dinosaur times. Not really, but it could look that way. Like I said, bring a laser measure or a tape measure too. You should have those tools. Those are agent tools we need anyway. So make this fun for your buyers. Give them homework to do while they're there. Give them something to do and participate in. And then I always bring work to do. If I got my laptop, I've got stuff to do. You know, I might be working on my files transaction or whatever. But yeah. It should be a special time. And again, here's what they should do. Measure any large furniture, take pictures and videos. They may not be in that house for another 30 to 45 days until closing. It's a long time. They get excited. They're like, oh, this is when they should fall in love deeper with the house. Oh, what are the most common inspection items in Kansas City? And that's what Alex was talking about at the home selling seminar. Termites, wood rot, foundation issues, radon, drainage issues, which are tied to the foundation issues. And wood rot many times is tied to the termites. Because then they love that wood because it tastes better when it's got a little wood rot because it's easier to chew on. So these are the most common things. How many pages do you think the average inspection report has for a buyer on their house to be? Any guesses?
65, 89.
40 or 50?
Yeah, it could be up to 80. It depends on the inspector. They all create different reports. So some of them, there's a software program they use. Some have created their own. But I want you thinking, if you have a first-time home buyer as your client and the inspector hands them a 50 to 80 page report about this house they're going to buy, what do you think goes off in their brains? And they start flipping the pages and there's all of the stuff on the report. What do you think happens to their brain? Bad house is falling down. They don't know the difference between something that is a priority that is causing damage or is a safety issue or an environmental issue versus a bad plug that you can go to that's easy to replace, right? They don't know the difference. That in their mind, that's just like overwhelming. So again, in order for this inspection period to have less stress for you and your clients, you better have been prepping them from the buyer's consultation to when you're doing showings with them to get them ready for this point. If you do not, they're going to freak on you. Radon. Some people, if you're not from Kansas City, have you ever lived any place, David, that has radon issues that you know of? Iowa, okay. But some people live in places where radon's not a thing. They move to Kansas City. We tell them it's the second leading cause of lung cancer. They freak out, rightfully so. But it's very treatable and you can mitigate it easily. There's effective mitigation, okay? Costs some money, but usually about $1,000, maybe 1,000 to 15, depends on the house and what kind of piping they have to do and all of that. So it's very treatable, but for some people, I've seen them just freak out. And I have a feeling that many times is because the agent didn't think about that and prep them that Over 50% of houses in Kansas City are over the EPA standard of radon levels. Over 50%. If you look at the radon map, we're glowing. Not in a good. It's just, and you can, and like either Alex or Matt was saying, I can't remember now because of them being kind of back to back. They were back to back. That you can start seeing that white piping up on the side of houses. And it's the venting. They drill into the concrete, put in a fan that pulls it out, goes up, boom. And so they're pulling the gases out of the house. So just be prepared. And people get, oh, yeah. So our job as buyers agents is to really prepare our buyers for this. Same with the sellers. If you're not talking to them what the most important things are and what becomes a sticking point, and if you're just hoping on getting an offer with an in its present condition, then waiving inspections, then you're going for the lucky factor and you're not preparing your sellers with what could come up. You know, there's some issues that's very hard if inspections are allowed and the buyer hasn't waived them. There are some issues like radon is hard for a seller to get out of. It's a safety issue. And almost any buyer would want that to be taken care of. So it's not just this buyer asking for it and you saying, no, I don't want to fix that. It's okay. And how do we know that the next buyer or the next buyer won't be asking for it too now? And we have to disclose it if we go back on the market. So shouldn't we try to resolve it with this buyer than taking the chance to going back on the market and having to disclose this issue? Make sense? So anytime they're doing inspections and a seller is like, nope, nope, nope. If it's usually because we didn't prepare them and tell them. When I do a seller's estimated proceeds sheet, I fill in closing costs as a possible negotiable item a buyer could be asking for. I put in inspection repairs in there. I put in termites because unless there is an in its present condition addendum, then the seller is required to treat for termites. It's in the sale contract unless it's been taken out by the in its present condition addendum. Okay, so we have to prepare them for that because then they think their house is a castle and nothing's wrong with it. I'll never forget, I had a buyer and he did take care of his house meticulously. I mean, they never wore shoes in their house. And while when I brought my stager in, I said, I know what you're going to say about the carpet. You're going to say it needs to be replaced because it's dated. It was cream with mauve borders. Very 80s, right? Very 80s, but it was perfect. I said, I know you're going to want probably that you're going to want to advise them to do that. I said, I did my research. We are the best house in this area. We are in the best condition and we are the most updated, even with dated carpet. And I said, so I don't ask them to replace that because we don't need to. And we didn't. However, they found that he had termites and he was not mad. He was mad at himself because he prided how well he took care of this house. He goes, where are they? I check. And they were hiding under a crop. I don't even remember. It was in this area. He goes, I can't believe I didn't see those. So even the most meticulous home seller, something can be wrong with their house. Any questions? Okay, let's talk about the inspection period. So in your contract, what does it default to? What's the contract default on inspections? There's a contract default in there of how many days?
10.
10 days. 10 days in the contract. Now, you can put in additional time. in a less of a seller's market, I would recommend negotiating 14 days. However, in this market, I don't think you can ask for more than 10.
Mhm.
I don't. That would make you stand out in a negative way. Okay, so know that some of the things that we recommend in some of these classes will depend on the market. And so here's why I want extra days is because here's what you need to know. So the whole house inspector goes out. And usually at that time, that's also when radon's being done and termites are being done, whether the inspector does them or contracts with a third party to come do them, they're usually done all at the same time. Then the inspector is going to say, well, I think you need a roofer to come out and look at this roof. I've seen some issues. So it's like going to your general practitioner, Dr. Rudker, and he said, you need to go to an ear, nose, and throat. So while they have general expertise, they don't consider they're not structural, most are not. I don't know one that's a structural engineer, right? Some are electricians. Sometimes the inspectors are people who have been either home builders or are in the trades. But so don't be surprised if the whole house inspector says, roofer, I recommend a roofer coming look at this. I recommend electrician looking at this electrical panel. I've never seen this kind of wiring before, meaning somebody, Uncle Bob, did some electrical work. I would highly recommend a structural engineer. So in order to get those people, while you're right there in that inspection, that's why if your buyer's going to do inspections, get it scheduled as soon as possible in those 10 days. Do you know what I do to sweeten the offer? If we're not waiving or saying we won't do inspection, I actually call my inspector and say, what do you got for Monday morning? Say I'm writing an offer on Friday. I said, do you have any appointments? Can you pencil me in? And then I submit my offer and I say to the listing agent, my buyer's so excited about this house. We have our inspection scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. That sends a really strong signal to that listing agent and hopefully to the seller that we mean it. We're not going to mess around with you. And I get the job done as an agent. And sometimes that has been the small difference in my offer that has gotten it accepted over somebody else's, because they were so impressed that I was so proactive, not going to mess around. And also I know, especially in the spring and summer, the good inspectors book up like nobody's business. So I wanted to make sure we could have a slot, because if you have 10 days, then the other thing you must be aware of is what day does my inspection period start? What day do you think it starts? Let's say if everything was signed today, when does your inspection? It is June 6th. So if the contract is fully executed and signed today, what is the first day of the inspection period? Yes, the next full day. The next full day. It's calendar days. We're talking Saturdays and Sundays. So be careful if you're, more and more inspection companies will do weekend inspections, but not all. And again, spring, summer, busy. It can be a bear to try to schedule inspections. Do not put it off, get it done. And then know that then if tomorrow the 7th is your first day of the inspection period, then we have 10 days. So 7, 8, 9, let's hope 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On the 16th, we have to be done with our inspections and we have to submit the paperwork to the other side, the listing side, no later than 11 p.m. the last day of the inspection period. If we do not, something will happen automatically at midnight. What is that? Anybody know what that is?
The seller can cancel? Or does it,
No.
The buyer can take, and contract is saying is essentially it's you agree on it no matter what.
Yep, you're gonna take it as is. So if you, as an agent, missed the inspection deadline and you didn't get the inspection notice over and the resolution of that of unacceptable conditions, if that's applicable, because you didn't waive inspections. If you do not get that in by the end of the last day, then you have gifted your buyer with the pleasure not of buying that house as is and no right to ask for renegotiations or cancel that contract due to the inspections.
So if part inspections come back, you could cancel due to inspections.
You can, if you don't have an as-is addendum
Right,
that
right.
says otherwise. Yeah, if we just stick with the normal contract, yes. But that is when that inspection notice form is where you're gonna say what our next steps are. It's gonna say, we've done inspections, we'd like to renegotiate, we've done inspections, we'll take as is, we've done inspections, we're going to cancel. It is, so that form is very important. It tells the sellers how you're gonna move forward. So in those 10 days, all the inspections need to be done. And if you have to call in specialists, you gotta hustle.
So I guess my question is, since we've talked about pre-inspections and not going for offers that have taken as is, no inspections or something, right? So it's like, would it be still in our best interest as the seller to let it go through even though they don't have inspections all the way through?
That's where that's a great question. Redker asked if a buyer's submitting an offer and they're waiving it, the buyer's waiving inspections, is that something we should recommend the seller going forward on? That's where you've hopefully had in-depth conversations with your seller about the risks of taking a buyer that hasn't done inspections, and then it is up to them.
Cause like if they choose, if they don't choose box 3, say in box 1 or 2, and during the process of doing the inspection, day 10 comes, technically the seller can be like, this is contractual, you're taking the house as is, but maybe something comes back in the lawsuit as far as like, hey, the seller should have known about X, Y, or Z.
Well,
Right.
there's always that risk. However, if
Like-
they miss the inspection deadline and they've done their inspections, then they had knowledge of what was wrong with the house. They just didn't get the opportunity to go back to the seller and renegotiate or have it fixed. Now, will I tell you, there are agents, experienced agents in this office who have missed that deadline and had to pay for big ticket items or get sued. So if you ever are in that position, and I'm talking about good agents, but imagine you have 6 transactions going on at one time and you miss the deadline of an inspection period. It can happen. When you're a solo practitioner, the weight of when you're under contract, well, that's great. The weight of hitting all the deadlines and knowing what has to happen next and making sure it happens, it's stressful and it's a lot. And I've seen agents miss this deadline and they've paid for roofs. They've paid for thousands of dollars in repairs because of what they did. They missed a contractual deadline. And that's not a good place to be. So it should be where you have a little angst is during this inspection period that you're hitting the deadlines and making sure that that happens. And then having those conversations with the buyer and seller of the pros and cons of their choices. Our job is to give our clients the best information that they can possibly have, so they make the best decision for them. And here's what's going to happen. David, you're going to have clients that make a decision that you never would. And you'll be like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to do that?" That's why I'm so fierce on inspections and the conversations I have with my clients, is because you don't want, and I hear this from especially newer agents. Well, I told them that they should. Oh no, I say I'll arm wrestle you. I say to my clients, I'm very passionate about inspections and the importance of them. It will be your choice what you do and how you do it. But I'm going to tell you from my experience, it is the most important thing you do in the purchasing of this house, because you need to know the health of the house that you're buying. However, in this market, to win a house, you might feel that you need to waive that because that's one of your choices. And my job is to give you all of your choices and you make the final determination. So I've had clients do things that I didn't think I wouldn't have done. Buy a house in a floodplain. I wouldn't have done. In Kansas City, you don't need to. You don't need to. Buy a house on a busy highway because it got you in a subdivision that you otherwise couldn't afford it, but it was the cheapest house on the market and had been on the market over a year. But they didn't want to go to Gardner. They wanted to be in Olathe, so they took that house. I would have never bought that house. You could see what people were eating in their cars on I-35 from your deck. It was like, oh my God, they're like right there. People make those decisions. Our job is to give good factual information. They make the decisions. I've seen some agents tell them, no, you can't do that. That's not true. Please don't do that. And also, like I mentioned before, that in the contract, it says that it must be done. The reason they can't rely on previous inspections because it has to be done at buyer's expense by an independent qualified inspector. So also the other thing you'll hear is, well, my dad, he works on AC units. He'll come inspect the house. He's not an independent qualified inspector. And while he can be there, you won't be able to use that as an item for negotiation if we're in that position to do that. Make sense? Any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Kristen. So if you're coming toward the end of that 10-day and you need to get a specialist out there, is it possible to extend the amount of days, but you have to get the sellers to agree upon that?
Excellent question. Yeah. Seller does not have to extend, and many of them won't, especially if they had multiple offers. And here's what you always have to keep in the back of your mind as a buyer's agent. They could have a backup offer. They do not have to disclose. They could have a backup offer, especially in this market. They do not have to disclose that to us. So if we push back and say, oh, I need more days, they'll say, no, you should have gotten them done in the time that you had. So that's why it's stressful, Connor, is because very rarely will a seller in this market allow you to extend the inspections. Unless something that comes up that all parties can agree, oh yeah. Like sometimes, like if the roof has an issue and it might be an insurance claim, and you need an insurance adjuster to come out to see, then all parties might say, hey, let's then extend so that we can have clarity on this issue. Factors affecting inspection and factors affecting inspections. Inspectors may not be able to see every aspect of the house due to access or weather. If there's drywall in the basement, they're not gonna be able to see if there's cracks in the basement wall, right? Like my basement is fully finished. Drywall, it's a whole finished area. I can't see cracks in my foundation. I don't, so I would have no knowledge. An inspector can't see, if he can't see it, he doesn't know it. Unless there's like water damage or, you know, something that would give you an indication that there's something more to this. Also, weather. If the weather's really bad, they might not be able to get on the roof. They might be able to, actually, I love inspections during the rain. I love home shopping in the spring when it's really rainy, because then you see what basements are good and which are not. You go under contract on a house and there are like torrential rains, and you're under contract, you're a buyer's agent, I'd be calling that listing agent and say, hey, how's the basement? I know this has been awful for so many people. Did the seller have any issues? Not to be accusatory, but just because sometimes, even though the contract says you have to disclose right away to the buyer any material differences in the house that happen while you're under contract, some don't. They want to get it fixed before they tell you, or they want to find out more about it before they tell you, and that's not what the contract says. And because too many agents don't understand all the terms of the contract, they might not even be aware of that. So that's why you as a buyer's agent are gonna know that and say, hey. Access, septic systems, those are a different animal. And those need to be inspected. They are a major system to the house. So there's two things, either a house is on a septic system, like my house is on a septic system. And there is an addendum that deals with houses on septic systems. If you're listing a house with a septic system, you should have that in your supplements for that listing, that residential septic system addendum. If you're a buyer's agent and they don't have it in the listing, you should be putting that with the offer. Because shame on that listing agent for not having it there, but there are a lot of agents who've never sold a house on septic. They get their first one, they don't know what they're doing. And then the other would be the sewer line check on a house that has normal plumbing. Those two systems can be truly some of the most expensive things to fix on a house. Then foundation, then roof. Those are your most expensive things to fix. If it's in Johnson County, Kansas, and it's a septic system, the county has to be there for the inspections, and they have to give the stamp of approval that it is safe and working. If it is not, they will require the seller to fix it prior to closing. So it's in the buyers are protected in Johnson County, Kansas. That's not the case in other counties. Access to the property and re-inspections. Okay, the seller must provide reasonable access. So this is, I'd love to tell you that the sale contract, that all of our contract documents are black and white. We've got some gray areas. We do. And you're going to be saying, well, we went to go scope the line, say the sewer line in a house, and it was blocked. Is the seller required to unblock it? It just says reasonable access. So there's a gray area. So you try to negotiate it. So the buyer wants to know about the sewer line and unfortunately it's blocked. Will the seller please have someone come and unblock that? Or can we use, on the sewer lines, some of the inspectors also do repairs. That's always kind of dicey in my world. And some just do the inspections. Okay. So just know that you're gonna be craving as an agent clarity, and sometimes in the contract it's a gray area. If it causes difficulties and it also causes parties to start, getting upset, then maybe if you need clarification on how to move forward on a contract provision, because things are getting difficult, then go to the broker. First, come to myself or Linda, contracts coach, or your coach. If we know, we'll advise, but there are certain things we're going to always point you to the broker. Contracts questions, just in general, how to do stuff. That's why you have us, and we're the buffer to the broker, so that the new people are not all running to the broker because she would be swamped. So we're that buffer, but if an issue is like, could be a law issue, a legal issue, or a lawsuit, or, like things are catching on fire and getting ugly, then we're going to point you right to Lynn, because she's the one whose license is on the line. Make sense? Okay. Damages and repairs. Who's responsible if the inspector makes damages the property at all? Says in the contract. Also says on my PowerPoint right there. Buyer. The buyer is responsible if the inspector does any damages from inspecting the property. And it happens. I'll give you an example. When I was a broker, we had a listing. The sellers were taxidermists, and they had huge chest freezers in their garage, 2 of them, huge, with prized dead animals in them of their clients that they were to mount. The buyer does inspections on the weekend. The sellers are gone for the weekend. The inspector tripped the plugs, and the freezers turned off for 3 days during the summer. Ruined the whole contents of the chest freezers. Not good. This is what these sellers do. He did for a living. Not good. Buyers are responsible for all the damage. And in order to make that deal happen, the buyer didn't pay for everything because they were threatening to pull out and cancel the contract. So we negotiated that they would pay for half of the damage, even though the contract said this. So just know there are times where, even though it says this in the contract, all parties might agree to something else to get to the finish line. And then there had to be an amendment saying that all parties are okay with that. But see what can happen? Crazy stuff happens. Crazy stuff happens.
So do some inspectors carry like insurance, or will they, if they damage something, will they pay for those damages, I guess, depending upon what it is?
Great question, Connor. If you read the contract that your buyer is going to sign with the inspector, they have so much protection that most of their contracts say they're only responsible just for reimbursing you for the amount of the inspection, unless you can prove that they were grossly negligent or something of that level, but you'd have to take them to court for that. And most of them have mediation paragraphs, meaning they can't go directly to court. They'd have to go to mediation first to have resolution. So most of the inspectors have a really tight contract that protects them at a very high level. And that's also why, let's be honest, that's also why they're going to recommend you get specialists for certain things, because they don't want to take all that liability. Make sense? Insurability. Remember that your buyers during the inspection period should be finding out what the insurance is going to be, and is their property, new property, to be insurable during the inspection period. And right now, what have we been hearing about home insurance? roofs and the cost. And they won't cover some houses, especially on the roofs. That's, you have a roof that's over 20 years old, danger, danger, danger. Again, that's a conversation you should have with the seller and then with the buyer. And if a buyer can't get insurance, they can't get a loan. Because no mortgage company is going to give you a mortgage on a house that's not insured and it burns down and then they have nothing. They have nothing, right? Factors affecting inspections. Like I said, they may not be able to see everything. Oh, why did it go up? Yeah, and insurability. Quality of repairs. Oh, okay. You're going to hear Kristen's mantra. I hate seller repairs. I hate seller repairs. And then I hate seller repairs. Does that give you an idea how I feel about seller repairs? Here's why. Again, as a broker, where were most of my pain points and issues? After closing. And the seller repaired something or even hired a handyman to repair it. Buyer moves in, it doesn't perform right. It wasn't fixed right. We have a conflict of interest when a buyer's asking for repairs from a seller and a seller is required to do it. Unless I would always, as a buyer's agent, get quotes on that repair. And I think both parties, I think the listing agent should get quotes on the repair. I think the buyer's agent should get quotes on the repair. And here's why. Do you think the seller is going to look for the most expensive contractor to do that repair? No, they're not. Do you think they're going to maybe find the absolute cheapest person and we don't even know if they're qualified? Is it more like an Uncle Bob doing the repair, right? So unless as a buyer's agent or as a buyer, you can be really, and that's why I want that estimate on my side, because I want to be, if I can't, you could negotiate to ask for a specific contractor or vendor to do that repair. But the seller has to agree to it. If they won't agree to using this contractor that you want, then you at least want the scope of work mapped out and say, well, whoever you hire has to do all of this. Does that make sense? Because most of us are not experts on repairs, on electrical work, on plumbing, on foundation. So when you're writing that resolution of unacceptable conditions, if you do ask for seller repairs, which I hate, you want to be as specific as possible. Otherwise, you have left it up to the seller to figure out what you asked for. And that's where the pain points come. And then if you say, well, I don't think you're doing the repair right. They're like, well, but you didn't, you said fix it. We found somebody to fix it. Makes sense? There's only a couple of things that I think the seller should fix, or you should have the seller fix, like a sewer line or a septic, because there are too many surprises that can happen in the undercut, in uncovering that. Because like the sewer line and septic, they're underground, and you're not going to know the extent of it until you start digging stuff up. Makes sense? So though there are too many unknown factors, I've seen too many sewer lines where the initial scope of work was this, but then they started digging and found there was issues, and it can go up thousands of dollars. So that type of thing I ideally would want done by the seller. And I know they can't hire Uncle Bob to do that repair. Or I'm going to be so specific. We're going to get quotes and estimates so we know that, but I want that because there can be surprises, if that makes sense. So again, we're trying to protect our clients to the highest level. And so anything else, you are better served in saying to your buyer, hey, you know what? Because there's a conflict of interest when it comes to repairs, I'm gonna recommend, let's get all, if we didn't negotiate all your closing costs, let's get the seller to cover all of that. Now you get that number from their lender on how much you should be asking for, because that keeps money in the pocket of your buyer who could then pay for those repairs. Or get money off of the price of the house. Sometimes you're asking for the closing costs, and sometimes that's not enough to cover the repairs, so you're gonna cover all the closing costs and then ask for something off. But try not to do seller repairs. It's not, and it's not in your seller's best interest either. That's where I don't know why we got lazy about this, but it's been this way ever since I've been an agent. Oh, we'll just have the seller fix that. And then I've seen all the nightmares that happen. I'm like, why do we keep kicking ourselves in the head and keep repeating this pattern of bad business practices? Because that's how we've been, I don't know, conditioned. I don't know. This is something I think we do horribly as agents in asking sellers to do repairs. It's not in our seller's best interest because they could be sued over that. And it's not in our buyer's best interest. So that's why I hate seller repairs. A seller repair that might be fine would be radon, because then you can have you can request in your resolution certified radon mitigation company. And that's a pretty straightforward repair or mitigation. But most things, we even had it where a seller did a repair. Our agents, buyers were under contract. There was an electrical issue in the inspections. The buyer asked for the seller to fix it. Seller fixed it, the house caught on fire because of the repair. So because it only says that the seller for the repair, workmanlike manner and with good quality materials. Doesn't say they have to be qualified, doesn't say that they don't have to be insured, bonded. No, just a workmanlike manner. And your workmanlike manner might be different than mine. Your idea of good quality materials may be different than mine. I might want premium paint. You might be just fine with what Walmart has, right? So wood destroying insects, remember what I said in the contract? It already says that the seller's obligated to treat if there's evidence of an active infestation, evidence of a past untreated infestation, or otherwise recommended. And sellers, unless you've gone through this with sellers, they'll say, well, there's no active and I've treated in the past. But if they say otherwise recommended, that's it. Seller has to treat. And for FHA and VA, it's required for them to for a buyer to qualify for a loan. Conventional, they don't require it. We're in termite country. Our wood tastes good. If you heard Alex, he says one of the number one things, termites, that he deals with in inspections. I had termites at my house years ago, and I thought it looks very similar to wood rot. And I thought, oh, I've got wood rot. And then I saw in my garage, because my garage, I have an under the house garage, and I saw the trails up the wall to my front stoop and then to the front window. I was like, ah. But it felt and looked very similar, but I'm not an expert. I was like, oh, dang, they've been chewing. Had to have the windowsill and then the whole house treated. Inspection reports must be delivered with within the inspection period, or the buyer will be responsible for the treatment. So know that when you are submitting the inspection notice form and the resolution of unacceptable conditions, then you as the buyer's agent are responsible for sending over all of the inspection reports in their entirety to the listing site. You have to prove that what you're asking for is valid. And you have to tell your buyer, we can only ask for things that are in writing in this report. And then you have to educate him on the difference of what the inspector said is priority meaning that we should definitely ask for this because it's impacting the value of this home. And if you had known that, you would have made a different offer, dollar offer, if you knew these issues about this house. So they also have to have substantial dollar amounts. We're not going for the $10 items. We're not. And buyers want a nickel and dime. And in this market, you can't afford to do that. You're just going to go for things that truly would be a big ticket item. So you have to deliver that. And with the termites, it has to be, that inspection report has to be with all of that, or your buyer's going to have to pay for the treatment if it's not. See how we've got some hard deadlines? So you gotta be like, oh God, I gotta hit these. I gotta hit these. I can't miss this. What if the buyer does not conduct inspections? Well, then the buyer then waives the right to cancel or renegotiate. They get it as is, even if they didn't fill out an as is addendum. What is an unacceptable condition? Does anybody know what? Because the resolution of unacceptable conditions is the buyer saying there's something unacceptable about this house, and thus I want to go back to the table. Because we didn't know this when we made our offer, and now we want. So what is an unacceptable condition? Anybody know? Anything in the inspection report, anything, big, little, in between. It can be a tiny thing. It's interesting, in some parts of the United States, like Texas, instead of an inspection period, they have an option period. And during the option period is when inspections are done, but you can cancel the contract for anything during that option period. Now you do have to pay like $500. I don't know if it's more anymore, that if you do cancel, that the seller gets that $500. But I think that's more honest. Sometimes you're going to have a buyer who wants to cancel the contract and it's not due to the inspections. It's just they don't want the house anymore, or they paid more. Now the panic of, oh my God, I just paid over list price for this house. What the hell was I thinking? I don't want to do this. They get buyer's remorse. And so, but we have to legally, contractually, couch it in terms that we're canceling due to inspections. So it can be a tiny little item. And you don't even have to tell the listing agent over why they canceled. Now, as a listing agent, I want to know so that my seller has an idea of what caused this cancellation, but the buyer doesn't have to tell us, but normally they do. Say, hey, it really freaked him out about that radon. I can't get him over it. So sorry. What if the buyer does not give timely notice of the unacceptable conditions? Like I said, and it is on you. It is not on the buyer. Yes, they signed the contract, but it is up to you. They do not know the ins and outs of the contract and what can happen and what the timelines are like you do. And so if that inspection notice and the resolution and all the copies of the inspection reports do not get delivered before the end of the last day of your inspection, then you've just gifted them with the house with no right to cancel or renegotiate. What if the buyer inspections reveal an unacceptable condition? Okay, so we come to the end. Oh, and here's another thing. When you submit your inspection notice, whether it's day 5 of a 10-day period, you just ended your inspection period. So your inspection period, even if you had in the contract 5 more days, the minute you submit the inspection notice form, you're done. I didn't know that on my first transaction. Guess what Kristen did? Well, okay, I had no training, I had no mentor. I didn't have a mentor. And so I was done with inspections, the whole house inspections. It didn't occur to me that the radon results weren't back yet. So I submitted my inspection notice. Guess who didn't sleep until the radon results came back? Because if they had come back high off of my very first transaction, I would have been paying for a mitigation system. I didn't know. Yeah, believe me, I never did that again. Some of our mistakes stick with us really well, but I don't want you to have the mistakes. I don't. Okay, so we come to the end of the inspection period. The buyer says, I want to renegotiate. And then we go into what's called a renegotiation period. In the contract, it's a 5-day period. Most people stay right at those 5 days. I rarely see anybody writing anything different in there. And during those 5 days, here's what can happen. Now, remember, I told you what happens to the buyer if after they do their inspections, they can accept it. They can offer to renegotiate or cancel. So the inspection period ends, and then we're in the resolution of unacceptable conditions period. And it is a 5-day window to renegotiate. And only three things can happen. The buyer agrees to everything and signs the resolution, and that binds the buyer. Then the buyer can't cancel. Because the seller just said, I'll do everything you asked. Boom. Done. The buyer and seller can negotiate on what the buyer's asking for and come to an agreement. Or the buyer signs the resolution and agrees to take the property in its present condition. And that binds the seller. And I'm going to tell you when that would happen, or when you want to be thinking strategically when it happens. You have to explain to your buyers before we go under contract, and then again, repeat it, is in the inspection period, if we ask for anything in our resolution, if we ask for price adjustment or closing costs, or heaven forbid, seller repairs, then we're going to have 5 days to come to agreement. And sometimes the seller's not going to come to agreement. We're not going to come to agreement with them, or they're going to say no. And if you really, really want that house, then you do have the opportunity to say, I call it the just kidding box on the back of the resolution. You have the ability to say, never mind, we'll take the house as is. I know we asked for things, just kidding. We want this house so much, and you do it in those 5 days that binds the seller. Because you know why the seller might not be coming to agreement with you? What could be in the background that we don't know? Backup offer. Remember what I said? A seller does not have to disclose a backup offer. If it's disclosed, I can guarantee you it's probably less or the same offer amount as yours is, and they're using it as leverage. If it is better than your buyers, they're not going to let you know because they don't want you to do the just kidding box. Now, so you've got to prepare your buyer. Please don't wait till day 5 and say, okay, we got to come up with a big decision. Can you imagine? Oh my God, I thought I was going to be able to get repairs, and now you're telling me at last minute I have to take it in its present condition if I want to keep this house? They'll have an aneurysm on you, or at least a panic attack, right? So you've got to prepare them for that. And if you do that, like I said, it binds the seller to the contract. They cannot cancel. Now, here's what's different about this period versus the inspection period. At the end of 5 days, something doesn't automatically happen. Something could happen on day 6. And that's either party by written notice can cancel this contract and say bye-bye. So if a seller had a backup offer and a buyer's agent isn't on top of it, they could just send over that cancellation, and you can't, and the buyer can't say, oh no, I'll take it as is. Bye, so long, farewell. Unilaterally kick you to the curb and you're gone. Can you imagine having to tell your buyer, we just lost your house? Now, if I get to day 5 or day 4 and we're not coming to agreement, but they're still kind of talking with me, sometimes they'll go completely silent on you. And that's a huge red flag that there's a backup offer. Because while you have 5 days to renegotiate, you don't have to talk. It's just, it's a window of opportunity that everybody has to be at the table, but you don't even have to communicate. But if that's not happening, then you better be talking to that buyer of, hey, what do you want to do? So again, you've got to know the contract better than anybody else, because can I tell you what it's like? As a broker, I remember getting a call from a new agent, buyer's agent, not ours, at a different brokerage, crying because she got that cancellation notice on day 6. And she said, but my buyer signed it. I said, but you didn't send it. It's not valid until received.
Okay.
And she had to go tell her buyers she lost their house. She was sobbing. I felt horrible for her. She didn't know what she didn't know. So if you got to that point, I would go back to the listing agent and say, hey, can we extend the resolution period? And that's also a way of calling them. Because if they say no, then I'm like, then I'm almost certain we have a backup offer. They've shown me all the signs without telling me, right? Well, but if we do the just kidding, then we sign them and seal them. So do you see why it's so important to know this contract? Because if you don't understand the workings of it and what happens and what doesn't happen and what could happen and where you have opportunities to save the deal for your clients or to get a backup offer for, I can't tell you, it's not our duty to tell a buyer's agent they're missing a deadline. It's not our duty. Now, sometimes if you can tell, if your seller doesn't want to kick them to the curb and then you say, hey, I haven't seen your inspection notice, or hey, but it is not our duty. We don't have to. It is our responsibility, agents, to know those deadlines and to perform for our clients. That's why I love this class, because it's so important. So much can go wrong and so much is at stake in this period.
So if I'm representing the buyer and it's day 4 and I haven't heard from the seller, then I can talk to him about that box 3, the third option there.
I would have talked to him in advance, but go back to it and say, hey, I would.
We expressed this, or we talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard from the seller. It's starting to look like this. What are your thoughts on?
First thing I would do is go to the listing agent, say, can we extend with an amendment the resolution period past the 5 days? If I don't hear from them or they say no, then that's when I go back to my buyer and say, okay, I told you what's going on, what I think could be going on. I think it's confirmed by, here's what the listing agent won't get back to me or said no. I believe there's a high likelihood they have a backup offer. How much do you want this house?
How long do you wait? How long would you wait if you're trying to contact the listing agent?
Well, I would, the minute they go, here's the thing.
It'll break a pattern, essentially.
Yeah, it'll break a pattern. That's why by day 4, I'm wanting hard answers from that listing agent. Can we extend? And then I'm having that hard conversation with my buyers about what do you want to do? Now, remember, on day 5, here's what's kind of can feel misleading. There are times where, yeah, both parties are still figuring out, because we're maybe still getting estimates and everything during that 5 days to figure out costs and stuff. Do not let it go past the 5 days without an amendment to extend, even if you feel like you're negotiating good faith, because you're at risk. You're not protecting your parties, especially your buyer. So I always want, even if we're in good faith, because I have seen it where we couldn't get estimates fast enough. All parties wanted to know the costs before they were agreed upon, or the extent of what was needed. And we had to extend the resolution period past the 5 days. And don't assume that because at the end of the 5th day, nothing hard happens and automatically happens, means that you're okay in not getting an amendment to extend.
Does that change the closing date if you extend the resolution?
No.
period?
It does not. It does not unless all parties agree to that. You would have to then amend the closing date. No, it's just the window for this. Yeah, and be careful about the backup offers. Yeah, great questions. It's tricky. I hate seller repairs. I showed these slides at the home selling seminar. This is Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob doing repairs. That's electrical tape here. That is a garden hose sprayer. Those are Legos. That is just a block of wood holding the house up. And that is a piece of art in plumbing, but not good. Not good art. Recommended repairs versus prospective repairs. If the inspector points out that it's in the inspection report. I talked about this earlier. Your buyer can't be asking for things, and we see it. So don't assume that they get this. Especially if they pay top dollar for a house. Here's what they see: the inspection period or asking for repairs is the time to recoup some of their money because they paid over list price. So they want a chunk of change, and the repairs only cost this much. So that's why as a listing agent, I'm going to get estimates so that my seller can figure out whether because most buyers, they double or triple what the actual repairs would be worth. And so I want to make sure that we're basing it on truth, on reality, and not just what the buyers would like. Not a code inspection. So usually those codes are not going to come up as an inspection item unless it pertains to a safety issue. Old homes versus new homes. I usually tell my buyers, if we're going to be looking at older homes, we're probably going to do more inspections, because the older the house, the more inspections that might be needed. More specialists coming in, that type of thing, because it's an older house. More things can be wrong. Is the condition of the house to be expected for the age of the home? It's challenging with buyers to set the expectation of, we're looking at 30-year-old houses. We're not looking at new construction. There's a crack in the driveway. Crack in the driveway. Well, I saw that every driveway on this street has a crack. Yeah, it'd be great to have a brand new driveway, but it's not impacting the functionality of this. So we're not going to be able to ask for repairs that make it like a brand new home. And that'll be your biggest challenge with your buyers, or setting those expectations with them. That will be your huge challenge. New construction, yes, do inspections. Codes inspections do not catch everything. So don't be lulled into thinking, well, the codes, there's some codes and inspectors that are great, and there are some that suck. And I have sold houses that people bought as new construction, but not with me. Didn't do inspections. And then when the buyer did inspections, we found, oh no, insulation above the garage. No, I mean, some, significant things. And it's like, no. Oh no, we didn't do inspection. Not all builders and developers love you doing inspections. And they might say, why are you doing that? Don't look, just no, my buyer wants to do inspections. Now, it's different though. The contract is totally different. You don't get an inspection period. You don't get a renegotiation period. So you've got to understand, when you're doing new construction, that looks totally different, but that is not a reason not to do the inspections. If we're requesting repairs, if you're going to do what I say I hate you to do, then make sure in your resolution that you're asking that all repairs be completed within 5 days prior to closing. Why do you think that is?
So it gets complete.
Yeah, so here's where you also have to prepare. If your buyers insist, because some of them will, even if you say, let's not do cellar repairs, let's not. I know you're gonna get a buyer who wants it all done before they move in. I know it. I'm not naive. However, if we're gonna do that, then I say to them, then you're gonna need to hire somebody, depending on the level of the repairs. You need to hire someone to come and look and make sure these repairs were done correctly. Because just putting in a new electrical panel, you and I won't know if it's hooked up right. It'll just look new. Yeah, great, new panel. So you, buyer, may have to pay someone to come back and look at these repairs. Again, I mean, we got to be real with them. And so I want to do, there is a difference between a repair review and a walkthrough. This is another horrible business practice for us as agents. We do the walkthrough. Normally it's like the night before closing. It's usually 48 hours at the most, because a lot of times the sellers are not even out of the house when you do the walkthrough sometimes. That's another thing you have to understand. However, we also have tied the repair reviews at the same time. And if something is not done right, 24 hours is not enough to get it taken care of or addressed. And here's what's happened. This broke my heart. As a broker, we had a buyer who had asked to have radon mitigation done, and it was a house on a crawl space. You may not know this, but to mitigate for radon on a house on a crawl space is like twice the cost, because they have to put a barrier material over all that dirt. Well, this home seller put plastic, like landscape plastic down, not a barrier that, and put in a dehumidifier that you can buy at Walmart. Plugged it in under there. You think I make this shit up? I do not. And it was the night before closing, and the buyer, I said, then extend closing. And the buyer's agent says she can't afford it to delay the closing. She's got everything lined up. Her family's coming from out of town to move her. And I didn't have anything. We tried to negotiate with the other side and couldn't get it done. So she moved in a house with like, and she didn't have the money to go sue them. She's a first-time home buyer. She barely had enough money for a down payment, right? Can you see how this gets? That's what seller repairs. Worst thing you can do. I'm hoping that this really sticks. And then I want a paid receipt from the contractor knowing that this was all done. But it has to be inspected. And that's why I want the 5 days, because I want enough time to re-inspect these repairs and not make it part of my walkthrough. Okay, let me wrap up quick because we're at time. FHA and VA loans. Okay, if your buyer has an FHA or VA loan, and then there is going to be an appraisal done. And the appraisal is also what I call a quasi-inspection. They have a list of conditions that the house must meet before they will insure that loan or approve that loan. So anything that they cite as an appraisal item is required to be repaired prior to closing. Now, here's the thing, FHA and VA do not care who pays for it. However, can I just tell you, it is never a good idea to have the buyer pay for a repair on a house they do not own.
Oh, yeah.
Had it done. Had a buyer who screwed up their credit right before closing. They got denied a loan. They had put a railing, stair railing on a deck because the seller didn't want to do it. As buyer was handy, I'll do it, paid for all the materials, put it on, screwed up his credit, couldn't get a loan, wanted the seller to pay him back for his time and labor. And the seller said, hell no, you just screwed up the closing. I'm not selling my house because you bounced a check. And then the buyer said, I'm gonna come tear it off your house. Okay. So it has to be done, but please, please, please. Please, please, please. The value of pre-inspecting listings. Repair review, already went through that. Okay, was this helpful? Yeah, did you get anything out of it? What was your number one takeaway?
Don't miss those deadlines.
What, Connor?
I said, don't miss the deadlines.
Don't miss the deadlines.
Only have the seller do repairs.
Uncertain, yeah, okay, we're talking. And yeah, so this is why we got to know this stuff, because there are big consequences in this. This isn't us just showing pretty houses and making people happy. This is getting through a legal transaction and making sure we don't get our pants sued. Okay? Because if you get sued, then we probably, the office gets sued too, because nobody gets in trouble alone in real estate. It's a joint. And again, I think I've said this before, but even if you do nothing wrong, but if they name you in a lawsuit, you've got to prove, you got to get legal counsel to get out of it. That sucks. And that's why you have E&O insurance. Or we all have E&O insurance. Thanks, everybody online. Thanks, Connor. Thanks, Autumn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.